It's time for the Ward Scott Files, hosted by John Martin. Join the Salty Dog and his captain, Ted Yoho. Search for the Ward Scott Files on Facebook, Vimeo, and over 30 audio platforms, including Apple and Spotify. Now here's your host, the Salty Dog, John Martin.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Pirate Podcast featuring myself, the host, John Martin, and my good friend, our captain of our pirate ship, Ted Yoho.
Good morning, John, and you are the head of the show here, taking us into the next section here where we're going to talk about. It's a great week. It's been busy, so we got a lot to talk about.
It is. One thing about it, never a dull moment.
Never.
Well, I don't know if you saw this or not, Ted, but over the weekend, the state of South Carolina, I guess, was blessed to have their state party meeting this weekend, their state convention. And believe it or not, the keynote speaker at that convention in South Carolina was none other than Tampon Tim Walz.
Wasn't he inspiring?
He was. And so I'm going to start the show out today with playing just a brief snippet of what he said there, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Check
Do
this
we
out.
have to?
To be a little meaner. Maybe it's time for us to be a little more fierce. Because we have to ferociously push back on this. And again, I'll speak to my teacher colleagues in here. The thing that bothers a teacher more than anything is to watch a bully, to watch this bully and to stop it. And when it's a child, you talk to them and you tell them why bullying's wrong. But when it's adult like Donald Trump, you bully the shit out of him back. You push back. You make sure they know it's not there. Because at heart.
Well, there you have it, Ted. That's Tim Walz at the South Carolina Democratic State Convention. And the essence of what he said there was that the Democrats just need to be meaner. More confrontational.
Just thank God that he's not our vice president, second in line. But this is a narrative that the Democrats do over and over again. You can go back to, years. I can remember Maxine Waters after Trump won the first time that if a person from the Trump cabinet is in a restaurant in D.C., you get in their face. They're always advocating for the violence. And you look at what they've done since they lost this last election. They're on violence on steroids. And then Antifa is raising its ugly head again. And I know we're going to talk about that later here in another segment. But this is what they advocate for. This is what they propose to do, and go out there and just be mean-spirited. It's not bringing our country together. And this is what AOC and Bernie Sanders are doing. They're just dividing the nation more. So, let's hope they keep doing that, because they'll never be back in power, nor do we want them.
Yeah, meaner and more confrontational is what he said. He said, basically, we got to stand up and we got to bully the bullies and everything else. And, you mentioned Antifa. Well, out in Seattle this past week, there was a group of Christians that had a permit for what they were doing. I think they were wrongfully put in an area of town where the powers that be knew they'd be confronted, but that's another story. But they were out there having essentially a prayer vigil. They were praying. They were pro-life, that type of thing. But they weren't accosting anybody. They weren't shouting at anybody. But Antifa and other groups and some LGBT, the Alphabet City people came out. And I want to play this video. And I ask people, is this mean enough? Because this video shows a woman with a family and a infant child literally in her arms. And look what happens to her.
Right.
Check this out.
A mother with 3 young children at a rally held by a Christian group outside Seattle City Hall Tuesday. Video circulating on social media shows. The Rattle in Seattle protest was organized by Mayday USA, which describes itself as a pro-life grassroots movement that defends traditional family values and units. The demonstrators descended on City Hall on Tuesday to rally against Seattle's woke mayor, Bruce Harrell, who blamed the conservative group for a weekend protest that turned violent. Mayday USA had held a demonstration on Saturday at the city's Cal Anderson Park.
I mean, Ted, is that mean enough? Is that mean enough for the people out there? Look at, like you mentioned while we were watching that, look at the look on those kids' face.
Oh,
man,
it's
and
fear.
the
It was
woman.
fear. And again, they got permitted to be there. And the mayor of Seattle, or of where this, it was Seattle,
Yes.
was saying that the Christian group were the instigators. They were the violent people, that they should never have been there, but yet they gave them the permit. And like you said, they gave them the permit for what, maybe to stage this. I don't know, but it's just shows you the direction of the country is going. Instead of coming together, that we need to do to get this country back on the right track, it's getting further and further divided by groups like this.
Yeah, it is, and so I would love to ask Tim Walz personally, just how mean do you need to be? And think about this, Ted. While I was putting the show notes together late yesterday afternoon, is when reports started coming in of what was happening out there in Boulder, Colorado, where a terrorist attacked that group. And Tim Walz said the Dems need to be more confrontational. And that was pretty confrontational. You're literally setting people on fire.
And again, you see the direction that this nation is going in. There's more violence, and I think there's going to be more to come, unfortunately. And this has got to stop somewhere, and it's going to stop when we get the leader that unites this nation. And we're going through a transition that we've never seen in our lifetime in government, and it's a transition that needed to happen. And it's, let's just hope we get through this quickly and peacefully, and that we get the wounds healed and that we move on. We went through the civil rights struggles of the 60s. It was ugly. We had the civil rights struggle. We had the women's movement. We had the immigration issues. But yet we went through all those, and they were ugly at times, but we came out a stronger nation. And we're at a point in time that I've never seen in this country, and that divide needs to end, and we need to get this healed quickly.
Yeah, well, I think one big difference there was that clearly the people that were standing up for civil rights, African Americans at that time, and people that supported them, they were trying to be more integrated into society, have the rights that they were guaranteed constitutionally. In essence, it was about their own personal liberty and freedom. And I think the majority of Americans were with it, and it took a while for the populace to totally wake up to it. But I think that's a big, big difference, because they were advocating to be a part of America,
They
really
were
a true part of
challenging
America.
the constitutional principles that weren't being advocated for or weren't being enacted. And so they stood up to that to get inclusive in that. And I don't want to use DEI and all that, but they were saying these are things that are not living by the Constitution. Whereas what we just saw, this is stuff going against dividing this nation more. It's hatred. People like Tim Walz are out there supporting this, and it needs to stop. And those people don't need to be in office or leaders of this country. I mean, they're not offering solutions; they're offering division.
Yeah, and I know you were pretty busy this morning, so I don't know if you've heard this, but when the news first came out last night about what happened out there in Boulder, they really didn't talk a lot about the suspect himself. But now, I know if you hadn't heard this, this is going to shock you, I'm sure. But this was an illegal immigrant from Egypt. Who was here illegally, who overstayed his visa, who was granted special permission by the Biden administration to stay longer. And I mean, it's just shocking, is it not?
Are we seeing a pattern here? I mean, you look at the guy from Harvard, Khalil. You look at this guy. You look at all these other ones that are going on. I know we talked about the young lady that got run over by the illegals last week in the kayak in Texas. There's a pattern that's going on. People that are here illegally that have been kicked out and brought back, or they've come back in, they're just staying here and they're causing these kind of things. And this is the whole reason, one of the big reasons Trump got elected. This is the mess that is being cleaned up. And the Democrats want to say, well, you're racist, you're xenophobic, you're all these things. No, we want to get back to the rule of law, and you can't do that if you don't have secure borders and you follow the law.
Yeah, another thought I had, and this is not knocking any of the people out there in Colorado, but I thought about something like that happening here in Florida, and I think that the one big difference would be that in Florida, because we are a red state, because we are a state that believes in the Second Amendment. I look at, like, you and I have been recently out in some crowds of people. Like, we went to this Tesla protest a couple of months ago, and there was a group of very staunch conservatives, many of them we knew, they're standing up for Tesla and all that. And if there had been a confrontation there, I got to believe that there'd have been some Second Amendment folks exercising their constitutional rights.
I know one of them.
Well, it's funny, Ted. You and I first kind of met. I don't think I've really said this to you before, but we met really during the Tea Party kind of movement.
We did.
And some of our mutual friends that we both got to know real well in there. And one of them was a little blonde-haired gal, Lori. I love you. But they were helping me in my campaign at the same time.
Great people.
And when I would go places, the group of people I had around me, I felt like I had more well-trained, armed people than sometimes the Secret Service around me. So I never worried about anything because I knew they were packing and I knew they knew how to use it. So, people are going to take matters in their own hands if this kind of stuff keeps happening.
Well, that's exactly where we're heading. And it goes back to what we've talked about before. Is there a civil war impending? You look at some of this stuff and you think it's already here. We want to do everything in our power to make sure it doesn't happen and that we get back to the rule of law and the leadership this nation makes, or the leadership this nation needs. And then, let's focus on the future, the golden age of America. It's here. Let's move through this, what we're going through right now. And I just hope these people come to their senses and say, what they're doing is not productive. It's tearing this country apart.
Yeah, well, in my notes here, and I say I wrote these right as that story was breaking, but language matters, actions matter. Sure. Think about this. The left, you can tell a lot about people by who they worship, so to speak. And I'm not talking about God. I'm talking about the heroes they make. And the people that the left are making heroes out of these villains, starting back, and this goes way back before this, but in the more recent times, George Floyd, he was a hero. This is a guy who put a gun to a pregnant woman and in a home invasion. This guy
beat her.
Yeah,
they beat her.
Was a hero. Of course, assassinating CEOs. This dude that assassinated the United Healthcare CEO, they've made him out a sex symbol and raised like $2 million for him. The list is on and on. MS-13 gang members, they're heroes. The Maryland man, all that. And now we got Hamas terrorists and their sympathizers are heroes. Right. It's just insane.
I was thinking about this on our trip, and what's happened to America. And it's like you said, who do they idolize? Who do they put up there on the pedestal, like, watch these people? And there was one of the Emmys, the lady, I think her name is Lizzie, her song won Best Song of the Year, Wet, blankety, blankety, and it was a filthy song, but yet the left idolizes this, and she gets an Emmy for this, or Record of the Year. And it's just, this is the kind of garbage that the left is putting out there that's dividing this. But you have to look at the groups behind this. Is it the Soros? He's the one that always gets blamed, or could it be the Communist Party of China? Could it be North Korea? Could it be Iran? Anything that tears down the moral fabrics of America, you see these people doing that, and that's what's really destroying this country. And we need to bring that bridge back to where we heal those wounds and we build to the future.
Well, we were saying earlier that, like, language matters, these types of things, and people are going to have to start taking some responsibility for what they're doing. And I don't know if you've seen this or not, but this is really, and I'm only going to play about a minute of it. You couldn't really stand much more of it. But this past week, I think it was on Thursday, they had the graduation ceremony at MIT. Now, MIT has not been in the news as much as like Harvard and Columbia. But this lady, let me set this up. This lady is the student body president, and she's speaking at the ceremony, the graduation ceremony at MIT, and I want you to hear what she has to say. Check this out.
You showed the world that MIT wants a free Palestine. Last spring, MIT's undergraduate body and graduate student union voted overwhelmingly to cut ties with the genocidal Israeli military. You called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. And you stood in solidarity with the pro-Palestine activists on campus. You faced threats, intimidation, and suppression coming from all directions, especially your own university officials. But you prevailed because the MIT community that I know.
Amazing.
It's sad, but I like how she talks about in there about there's no universities in Gaza, and like I don't know if there ever were any universities in Gaza, but if they were, why didn't she go study there?
You got to wonder, why is there not a university in Gaza? They've been around a long time. Hamas doesn't want that. And you got to go back to Yasser Arafat. The guy was a communist. They don't want educated people. They want people that are going to be under their thumb and do what they tell them to do. And, maybe she can take her knowledge and go back there and start one. That'd be the best thing to do.
Well, one of the things I hear the media talking about, and of course you hear the leftist politicians, they will talk about, and if you were to interview this young lady, she'd probably say the same thing, that they try to separate the Hamas from the Palestinian cause and all of that, and focus on the violence of the state of Israel, that type of thing. But the problem is Hamas is calling for a worldwide intifada. That's what they call it. They don't want intifada in what they're calling Palestine. In the Middle East, they want a worldwide intifada, which means taking the fight worldwide,
right,
which is exactly what that guy did in Boulder, Colorado. So if you're standing up saying free Palestine and advocating for a worldwide intifada, you are advocating for those 2 Jewish students or 2 Jewish diplomats to be gunned down in D.C.
I think we're seeing it. I think you are seeing it. And, when ISIS got on the scenes, and remember how ISIS got here, it got here by the policies of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama when they went into Libya and took out the no-fly zones of Gaddafi that left no internal security, no air support security, and Gaddafi fell. And if you read Robert Gates's book, Duty, they said that when Hillary and when Clinton and Obama did this, they didn't have a plan for what came after that. And they were quoted as saying, well, let's do this and see what happens. Well, you know what happened was ISIS. And all the recruiting, Al-Qaeda came out of that, all these terrible things that came out of that. And the global attack on changing the world to bow down to Islam happened. And that's why we have these terrorist attacks. And it's starting to rise again. We thought it was gone, but it's not gone. It'll never be gone. It's an ideology. You can't get rid of ideologies like that.
Yeah, and the thing is, free speech, I believe in free speech, and I don't, I understand that free speech doesn't always mean agreeable speech, because then it's not free.
Right.
So we have to be able to tolerate a lot of different things. But free speech does not mean no consequences. So if you are a foreign student here,
to your actions. That's
right, and you're advocating for this, worldwide intifada, and you're a foreign student, there's nothing wrong with what Marco Rubio is talking about, pulling your visa and that type of thing. So, there are consequences.
There really are.
For your
they're
speech.
Inciting violence. They're inciting violence. They're inciting hatred against the Jewish people. And we can't do that. I mean, where does it end? I mean, what goes next? Well, there's that professor, Brittany Cooper, out of Rutgers University, I think. She was the one that was advocating to go out and shoot white people. And she's a professor. And why people like that are allowed to keep teaching, I don't understand. They need to be polled. Their tenure needs to go away. They're just, it's hate speech is what it's doing.
Yeah, well, you ask, where does this go, where we're headed and all that. Let me just tell you, and let me preface this. I am not advocating for this. I'm simply saying this is the ultimate what will happen. At some point, people will take matters into their own hands.
That's coming.
If they can't rely on the government and the powers that be to save them, their families, there are people who will take matters in their own hands. And think about this. Remember the Wild Wild West? There was people talk about that the trains are being robbed out in California,
Right.
and stagecoaches used to get robbed. Well, they're kind of like the UPS and the Amazon
Right.
and of the day, FedEx stuff. They're being robbed. What happened in the West? Because the West got to a point, people don't remember this. It got so violent out there in the West that people were not only not going anymore, but they were coming back, and businesses were going to be put out of business. And what happened was they took matters in their own hands. There is a solution for a lot of these problems we have, and I'm not advocating for it. I'm just telling you that people are gonna do this. They ended up putting those people in the ground. Literally, they hunted down these lawless people to the last person, took no prisoners, and put them in the ground. That's what we're gonna come to if this continues to happen.
Well, you think about the 1920s and Prohibition, and the bootleggers and all that. We had the G-men, Elliot Ness and the G-men, and government kind of just did that. I mean, they just went around and there were all these wars and all that stuff going on. And we saw it again with the cocaine in Miami, the drug wars and all that, how people were just being shot out in the open. And, again, we've been through that. Do we want to go through it again as a nation? And what's it take not to do that? It goes back to having leaders that'll enforce the laws on the book and hold people that are out there inciting violence. It's not free speech. If there's actions that are behind that people take because you've inflamed them to do that, you're responsible for that. So there's the responsibility of that free speech that we have in the First Amendment. And I fear what you're saying may come to fruition, and I hope we don't see it. It just needs to be dealt with in a proper way.
And we've got to have the courage of a nation to stand up and say what's not right.
Right.
Period. That's just the way it is. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break. If you'd like to be a sponsor of our show, look at the little tab you see right there. It says advertise with us, contact Freddie, because we'd love to have your support, and we appreciate you
Absolutely.
supporting our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Although the owner of Lewis Oil Company maintains she is 29, Lewis Oil turns 60 years old in June. Chevron would like to recognize the North Florida second-generation family-owned business, celebrating its growth and staying power. Lewis Oil Company maintains significant on-hand supplies, strategically located fuel depots, a delivery fleet, on-site service, fuel card locks, and convenience stores. Lewis Oil Company understands its responsibility in the local economy by providing service and delivery on demand and in crisis. As a first responder for 18 Florida counties and the Southeast from Texas to Virginia, we are proud of this rare accomplishment. Lewis Oil delivers.
This is Ward Scott, and I want to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. The Ward Scott Files premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care.
Meldon Law, the only official injury partner of the Florida Gators.
The Ward Scott Files Gold sponsors are Lewis Oil Company,
Shoot GTR,
On the Spot Dry Cleaners, R&R Construction, and Style Cuts. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, www.wardscottfiles.com, and click on the Advertise Here banner on the right side of the page, or call my friend Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the Ward Scott Files. And remember, if you like the show, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Or that very much surprises me that you've never been tased. handle the truth.
All bees poop.
A warthog. He's going to come up the steps. Here he comes. Oh my goodness, and he's huge. Hello, boy. Wonder if we can pet him. Hi, boy.
Can we touch him? No, don't.
Help me! Help! Help!
And we're back,
And
ladies
we're
and
back.
gentlemen. Well, we're another thing we need to update people.
Threw you off there, didn't I?
Yeah, man, it's okay. It's the beauty of a live podcast.
It is.
Which is, by the way, we're on live Monday and Fridays here, and wherever you're watching now, please like what we're doing and share it far and wide, and make comments. We'll respond to them as soon as we possibly can. Well, Ted, this is something we've been following for a while. The Ukraine Russian war, and there was a huge development over the last couple of days. I'm going to read a little bit from an AP story. Ukrainian drone attack has destroyed more than 40 Russian planes deep in Russian territory, a Ukraine security official told the Associated Press on Sunday. I want to play this video. This is an actual video of the drones attacking bombers inside of Russia, like 2,000 miles inside of Russia.
It was an amazing attack, how they orchestrated this.
So let's check it out, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Это какой уже 11-й? 11-й. Смотри, что творится, я не знаю даже, что это сейчас взорвалось.
Your thoughts there, Ted. I heard you say it before we came right back. It's amazing. It is pretty amazing and frightening at the same time, because it has implications not only between Russia and Ukraine and, of course, NATO and the United States of America, but it also shows the potential of being attacked in an unconventional way.
Unconventional way. For them to be able to go in there and do this 2,000 miles in, undetected, with all their intelligence that's going on, that they have the capability of, and they were able to pull this off. It's been planned for a year and a half, which amazes me that it didn't leak out. But to be executed this efficiently, there's going to be retribution. This war is supposed to be coming to an end. We've had they have had the meetings, and Russia let 1,000 prisoners go. But at the same time, they're bombing Ukraine, and now we see this. Putin, he is not going to let this go unchecked, and I don't know what he's got planned, but it's going to be ugly. It'll be dramatic, and does that bring in the European nations into a war? We've already seen what the Baltic countries have done. They pulled themselves out of the landmine treaty, and they're mining their borders. They're gearing up for war, and there's just a lot of stuff going on around the world. This is just but one. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, also another quick late-breaking thing that's not directly but indirectly, I guess, related to this is it looks, now the final results aren't in, but it looks like that the conservative candidate is going to win the presidency in Poland. And I'm not saying it's good, bad, or whatever. I do think that part of that is a reaction to what's happening in that whole region. So
it is. There's no doubt.
People are gearing up potentially for war.
We just got back, from the European cruise, and we went through a lot of the previous communist countries that were under Russia control, and they do not like communism. They do not like Russia. And so they are aligning themselves to protect their borders because they see what Putin's doing. He's trying to reclaim old Mother Russia, he needs to move on. This is the 21st century. Those things happen. Countries lose borders all the time, and you just need to move on and build your country stronger, economically. Focus on making a better life for the people of Russia. They're becoming the pariah like Kim Jong-un of North Korea, or the Ayatollahs of Iran. The citizens don't like these people, but yet they've got such suppressive regimes that it's hard for them to get out of that.
Well, when you look at, and it just kind of, as when you talk, things pop in my head.
That's good.
When you look at what's happening around the world, and you look at countries like Russia that have had basically a dictatorship throughout most of their history, if not all of their history, and I know it's not an apples to apples comparison, but it makes what happened in this country even more remarkable when you think about it.
No, it really does. And it's, we're not a perfect country. And I've said this multiple times because people like me are in it. But yet you compare it to the systems around the world, nobody has the liberties and freedoms that we do. They'll talk about socialism and how great it is. You've got free healthcare, free this, free that. But the truth of the matter is they're paying 50% of their income to taxes, and so they're really not free, and then the services aren't good. I mean, it's a joke. We need to come together as Americans and make this country that much stronger and that much more efficient. And we're going through an adjustment phase in our federal government that I've never seen in my lifetime. Have you?
No, that's true. We haven't.
So,
and
God bless Trump, and let's get through this. Let's get it, the bad stuff out and focus on where we're heading.
And we may have only a short window of time to do all this. And President Trump is the hardest working president I've ever seen.
Yeah, he was at a rally the other night.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Last night, I think.
Well, you kind of mentioned this, that the attack that happened, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about the drone attack deep inside, about 2,000 miles inside of Russia, that the Ukraine was able to pull off. And I've seen reports that it was up to $7 billion worth of damage, and that they destroyed a considerable number of the bombers there. But this apparently, according to an anonymous source that spoke to AP from part of the Ukrainian government, said the attack took over a year and a half to execute and was personally supervised by Ukrainian President Zelensky. One of the interesting, if that's true, and I'm sure it probably is, one of the interesting things about this, President Trump, when asked about this, said that he was totally unaware of this plan. And I only bring that up to say that Zelensky, was just in the Oval Office in a much publicized situation. And obviously, if this took a year and a half to do, and Zelensky was involved in it, they knew when all of these peacetime talks started, when they talked about ceasefires and all this, that they were planning to do this. And it just makes it kind of interesting that all of that's jumbled together.
Well, it makes you think about how good is our intelligence service. Has it been going down for the last 10, 15 years? For us not to know this, and there is an agreement that you can't attack those kind of armaments, the planes that Russia has, because that's part of the nuclear force that they have, and that one of the part of the agreement was they had to keep these planes out in the open so that the satellites could monitor them. And there's no, you're not supposed to attack those without prior, talks. And like you said, Zelensky didn't bring any of this up. So I think President Trump has plausible deniability here, and this is going to escalate, and I just hope Putin doesn't want to see a big explosion over there from a nuke.
Well, desperate people, you've heard me say this before, will do desperate things, and you have to look at it and say, well, what would I do if I were in charge of Ukraine? If literally I believed, and I think Zelensky believes this rightly or not, and he's probably right, that, certainly if Russia were to take over Ukraine, his life would probably end unless he got out of there.
Sure.
But the Ukrainian people are probably looking at this as they're basically Armageddon. And when you look at that, it's either fight or die.
That's pretty much what it is.
What do you do?
Well, that's what I liked about the animal world, because animals were predictable. And like you said, if you get one backed in a corner and they're injured, you know they're going to attack. And that's what's going on now, but the animals have more common sense than people do, because they know when they're beat, they just walk away. They'll leave each other alone, but not so here, because you've got pride, you've got, greed. Putin wants all of Ukraine, not just that portion that he stole. And this is going to escalate, especially after what Zelensky just did with this drone attack. It's funny how reality follows a lot of time what happens in movies out of Hollywood. There was that one with, I think it was White House Down, that had Morgan Freeman in there and Gerard Butler, where they had the drone attacks on the individuals. We're seeing that now. We saw that in the fields of Ukrainian, the fighting with the Russian soldiers. They were taking them out with drones, personalized drones, attacking people. And, we are here.
Yeah, and when you look at all the crazy stuff that's happening, like with the terrorist attack in Boulder the other day, is there any doubt that if the terrorists, these people who are pushing for like worldwide Intifada, if they had the capability to do what Ukraine did a couple days ago, wouldn't they do that here?
Oh, in a heartbeat. They're just waiting for the signal.
It'd be just like you say, just like that. They would do it.
Sure would be.
Well, another interesting part, a couple more interesting parts of this story.
Yeah.
Russia had just, and I don't know if Ukraine waited for this or whatever, but Ukraine had just, Russia just pounded Ukraine with missiles and drone, a pretty severe one, like the day before the Ukrainians did this assault on Russia. So that's interesting. There was also, I don't know if you saw this or not, but in we forget how big Russia is, so this may not be related at all. But there were a couple of train crashes in Russia on the same day as this drone attack, and a couple of bridges failed. Now, there's no evidence that they were blown up yet that we know of, but of course Russia is saying all of that is tied into it, and I would imagine Ukraine would be happy to take responsibility. So that's interesting. And then on top of all this, starting today, the Russians and Ukrainians are supposed to start peace talks with our supervision again today.
They need to put them in straitjackets so they're not poking each other in the eye as they're trying to negotiate. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. How do you do peace talks when, you've got both countries bombing the other ones? Of course, Russia was doing more of it, bombing in the cities, killing, innocent the civilians. And Zelensky, Ukraine goes and attacks the plane, armament.
Yeah, this puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the Trump administration, I do believe, because, President Trump, and you and I have talked about this, and I know you feel like that was a mistake that the president said, I could end this on day one. Yeah. I think it's one thing to say it wouldn't have happened if I were president,
sure,
but to say it could end on day one was probably something that was not practical no matter what. It certainly hasn't proven to be that way. And it seems like the situation is actually getting worse, but sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. So it's just going to be really interesting. Where do you think we're heading in all of this right now? Because it's pretty scary, really.
Where I think it's heading, I think it's World War III. You're seeing the beginnings of it. And I base that on several things. One is you look at the economic situation around the world in these different countries. You look at our economic situation in this country, we're going backwards. You look at China, you look at the European Union, Germany, all those. You look at what's going on in the Asia Pacific theater. There's all this angst that is growing. You've got the economics, you've got unemployment that is rising, especially in China. And then you look at what countries are doing. Their actions speak louder than their words. Germany is putting in $1 trillion into their defense budget. They're lending other European Union countries money so that they can boost theirs up. You look at Japan, who has, since World War II, their agreement was their military or navy was for humanitarian and self-defense. They have changed that to where they are going to first strike capabilities. You look at what China is doing, not just in the South China Sea, but around the world. They're building their navy. They can't build the aircraft carriers fast enough. And they're expanding around the world through their Belt and Road Initiative. You look at what North Korea is doing. luckily that ship they just built didn't launch too well. And then you look at what Iran is doing in Venezuela. All these things are festering, and I just think there's going to be something that happens. I think we're right on the verge of World War III.
Well, it reminds me a lot of what World War One, the situation prior to World War One, because what you had in that situation, I mean, World War II was obviously you had mega superpowers in like Germany and to a certain extent Italy and certainly Japan that unified together as a big major front against the West. But in World War One, you had all these minor skirmishes.
Right.
And there were hot spots all over the globe, and it started with something as simple as an archduke getting assassinated.
Right.
And I was thinking about this just a couple of weeks ago. You talk about nuclear exchange potential with Russia. We were on the verge of a nuclear exchange between Pakistan and India.
We sure were.
So, it just takes...
I forgot to bring that conflict up.
If that had happened, that could have sparked the World War right there.
Sure is.
So there's so many little skirmishes, and I don't mean necessarily little, but you look everywhere, the Middle East, here now we've got things happening here, but obviously the Ukraine, I just talked about India and Pakistan. I mean, any one of these things could be the match that sets the tinderbox on fire.
It can, and I've mentioned this before when I was in Japan. And I was meeting with generals, legislators, ambassadors. They said if China moves on Taiwan, it automatically brings them into a war with China. So if that happens, it automatically brings us into it because of our agreement from World War II. So, there's all these things that are just rumbling around the world. And then you throw in non-state actors like ISIS or Antifa or Al-Qaeda that are going to foment one of these things. And you were saying how World War I started with the Duke being assassinated by a Polish citizen, and that fomented the beginning of World War I.
Yeah, I think we're in a very scarily similar time.
And we feel safe in this country because it's over there, but it could be here in a heartbeat, as we saw with Pearl Harbor, or as we saw with the weather balloon that flew over our continent under the Biden administration. You talk about a mock of national security by China to us to show how weak we are. Not we, but the president, the person that was in the White House, I'll say.
Yeah, and another scary thought I just had, talking about the different world wars we've had. Of course, and I think wrongfully so, we interned the Japanese citizens in the United States, many of whom had assimilated and had things here. But we now have millions of people, and I'm not labeling them all this way, but we have millions of people that have just come into the country, and some of them we know are on the terrorist watch list and that kind of thing. We probably have multiple sleeper cells in this country, and certainly lone wolves, that if we had a situation like World War I skirmish, we'd start having more stuff happening here.
Well, I think you're right, and I think that's a good parallel when you go back to what happened with the internment with the Japanese citizens. It's kind of going on now. They're cleaning up the people that are here illegally, and you're going to have the people on the left or more compassionate people say, well, we shouldn't be doing this. We're a compassionate nation. But the number one role of the federal government is national security. You have got to get these things organized. You've got to secure the borders. You've got to find who is in the country legally and illegally and deal with it accordingly. This is about national preservation. This is about the preservation of the United States of America. That should be the number one goal of the nation. And then you've got to work through all the other challenges, our debt, our foreign policy with different countries, energy security, and all those things. We know right now that China has hacked into every one of our infrastructure, whether it's water, electricity, telecommunications, banking, the FAA, they're everywhere. I can only hope that we're hacked into theirs, excuse me, for a reciprocal eye for an eye type of attack, and that scares them enough to where they won't do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, there's another story I wanted to talk a little bit about. It didn't get as much attention probably as the left-wing media would like it to get, but I'm reading to a little bit from a CNN article here. Federal agents briefly detain aide at New York Representative Jerry Nadler's office during nearby protests against migration detention. So what was happening was in a building that is occupied by both Jerry Nadler and a U.S. Customs courtroom and that kind of thing on a different floor, they were dealing with some immigration issues, illegals, that type of thing. And there were protests, and there was it was heard that some of the protesters went into Jerry Nadler's office, and Department of Homeland Security people went in there to try to protect these people, and they were met with some resistance. In a statement released by Congress, apparently, let me read this part right here, and then we'll get to it. So there was a woman who said, a couple of people actually said that some of these individuals that were protesting in the courtroom, that one of Nadler's staff people, and it's the one they ended up handcuffing, told them they could hide out in that office, in their office. So they went to check it out, and it just got pretty crazy after that. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we have the right of free speech in this country, and to protest, you can do that. But if it gets to the point where it's violent, you cause damage, or one of the people I heard push one of the Capitol Hill police, that goes beyond the line. And so, if that person was being hidden in that office, and the First Amendment you're going to have to wait until they get that person apprehended. And for this person to stand in the way of that, you're blocking, you're actually putting a lot of people at risk when you do these kind of things. And Jerry Nadler, he's a piece of work. He's a good representation of the people of his district.
Yeah, he basically said that they were totally wrong and they shouldn't have come in there, and that they weren't hiding anybody, all that. I don't know if that's true or not, but one thing we know for sure is we can believe anything that Jerry Nadler says. I want to play you this video from about 4 or 5 years ago when there was all that Antifa protests in Portland. Check this out as Jerry Nadler said what was happening out there.
But I'm being blocked from showing that video.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, it's saying I need to verify age, which I can't do in this program, and then I'm being blocked from downloading it and play this.
We'll just tell him what he
said.
Yeah.
Well, according to my producer, we're being blocked for some reason for showing that. Probably Jerry Nadler's reaching his hand out and doing it. But in this video I was going to show you, and you can look it up on YouTube, it's pretty easy to find. Jerry Nadler was asked, now keep in mind, he was asked about what was happening out in Portland while they were literally attacking a federal courthouse out there, firebombing it and everything, and everybody could see it. It was on TV every night. And Jerry Nadler was asked about Antifa, and he literally said, Antifa is a myth.
That's right.
They're not doing anything out there. So don't believe your lying eyes. Believe what Jerry Nadler was saying.
Sounds like a good country song.
It's just incredible. Well, we'll go ahead and move along on this.
Well, talking about that, it's kind of like Ilhan Omar when she was asked about those two Jewish people killed outside of that venue up in D.C., and she asked for a comment. She goes, I have work to do. So she just
move. I got to move on.
Yeah, and it's kind of the way Nadler is. It's a myth. Let's move on.
Well, here's one other thing I wanted to point out about the Nadler story there. Think about this. What does the left always say, Ted, about immigrants, illegal immigrants? They need due process.
Due process.
Well, guess what? That's what was happening at this courthouse. They were having due process. They were going before a U.S. Customs immigration court, and they were getting their due process. I don't know how it would have turned out, but they were getting their due process when these protesters busted in and disrupted the court.
Right. Yeah.
So what do you want?
All we can do is hope they stay the way they are so they never get reelected.
Yeah, it's like...
Never in power again.
What about the due process of our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness?
Right.
That should be our due process, and this stuff is just.
And you wouldn't think there would be a divide in this country on that. I mean, everybody should be pulling together to make that happen.
Yeah, well, we got about 5 minutes left in the show. I wanted to touch base on this because according to the statistics I've seen, ICE right now is averaging between 1,600 and 1,800 apprehensions a day, which is pretty impressive. But President Trump has raised the bar and said very shortly he wants to get to 3,000 apprehensions per day around the country. And what are your thoughts on that, Ted?
Well, I think it's a good goal. You got to have a goal, and I think we do need to ramp that up because we know the midterms are coming up, and he could lose that ability to be able to do this. One of the reasons that ICE is saying, well, we don't have the facilities for that, and I know this is going to rub some people wrong. I had the opportunity to go down to Guantanamo when I was in Congress, and they were clearing land, and they said they were going to build a tent city down there that could house like 40,000 people. We have a way to contain people until they do have their due process. And I think we need to move forward with this because it was such a mess under the Biden administration. And don't forget the Obama administration, too. You know, this is something that's built up over the years, and we're at a point where we can't handle it anymore without going and starting to get these things under control. And this is the process. And it is going to be ugly, but the ugliness was brought on by the open borders that allowed so many people to come in here unchecked. And you were talking about, you know, the Trojan horses, the soldiers in the Trojan horses, and the sleeper cells that could be developing. We already know they are, but you look at how many Chinese students came in, or not Chinese students, but how many people of Chinese nationality came in our southwest border. And the northern border up around New York, all along the between us and Canada. And it's something that has to be brought under control, and this is the beginning of it.
Yeah, and we've already seen a video earlier of all the infiltration. As I said earlier, they said that Harvard has about 30% foreign students, and I'm not opposed to foreign students coming here.
No, absolutely
but
not.
What's really interesting about some of this debate that they're having on these college campuses is you hear at Harvard, well, we need these foreign students and everything for our science and research, and that may be true. But two things on that. If it is true, then we're in deep trouble because we should be able to provide that type of education to our own people and motivate them. But the other thing that just really baffles me is when you look at like Nobel Prizes in the sciences, really in everything. Do you know what ethnic group is like light years number one in Nobel Prizes?
I would have to guess the Asians.
Actually, it's Jewish people.
Okay,
Jewish,
I'd go along with that.
Jewish descendants are the number one recipients of Nobel Prizes in science, in all the sciences, even in peace and everything else. I mean, they just are. And so here you are talking about excluding Jewish students at these universities, making them where they can't go to class, but at the same time telling me we need to bring in more foreign people to help with our sciences. It just is crazy. But the last thing on this topic about this going from 1,800 to 3,000, you know, two big issues you have. One is you're dealing with the sanctuary cities and states and communities. So they're literally hampering the ICE effort because we saw that judge in Minnesota and all that. But a great patriot and somebody I know you probably have met, but I would love to meet him. I don't know if you met Grady Judd or not, but we got some great sheriffs in the state of Florida. He came out and said he's 100% behind Trump, 100% behind the ICE mission and everything. But he said we got a problem because these county jails like his, they can't afford to hold these people.
Right.
There's some legal issues, but really it's financial. And unless they get help from the federal government, they're not going to be able to hold all of these additional people. So we're probably going to have to send them somewhere like Guantanamo.
Well, I think it's a good place to put them, and I think it sends a strong message. You know, if you do this, this is where you're going, and you will have your day in court, but you will go here. And you know, Grady Judd reminds me of that video clip you had of Lonesome Dove the other day. Lonesome Dove, he's the guy that says, "Go find a tree."
Yeah. The greatest thing Grady Judd, he said so many, but the first time he really popped on my radar screen was when they had a guy kill one of his deputies, and they went out there and the guy got shot like 65 times out in the after killing one of his deputies. And the CNN reporter asked him, said, well, how come you shot the guy 65 times? And he said, well, we would have shot him more, but we ran out of bullets. I mean, love him, hate him, or whatever. I love the guy. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you.
We sure have.
Please like what we're doing. Share it far and wide. And any final thoughts, Ted?
Yeah, if you want to become a sponsor, call the number there, contact Freddie, and we'd love to have you on there. We want to spread your business around and share our podcast, and we look forward to doing more of these with you.
Yep. Peace out.
Y'all take care. Have a great day.